So let's quickly continue formatting or pricing tables. And first of all, let's give them here a background color to make them stand out from the rest of the section here. So yeah, we hadn't even selected them yet. So pricing plan. And then the background color of this very light orange here. So basically our very lightest tint. And so, yeah, so we have the color, but of course there are a lot of things to fix. So we need some spacing here, so some padding, and let's also make the borders round. So using the same border radius as we used up here. So I believe that was 11 pixels. So border radius 11 pixels, and adding a nice big padding of 4.8 rem. So let's try that. And that is already starting to look good. However, there are some things that are not really good. And the first of all is that these columns are very, very wide, right? So they are this wide because we simply created a grid with 2 columns here. However, we do not want these elements here to fill the entire column, basically. And that is, of course, possible. We can simply make them a little bit less wide. So right now, these elements, they occupy the entire grid cell because they are block level elements, and so they will expand to 100% of width of the available space, right? And we can, of course, easily see that here. So between these dashed lines here, as you know, we have the grid cells. So one grid cell and one grid cell. And so each of these elements is occupying by default that entire cell. But let's change that by making them a little bit less wide. So for example, just 75% of the available width. And so that's how it looks like then. So that looks a little bit nicer, right? However, of course, this one should now still move here, so that then the entire thing is basically centered, and so that we don't have this huge spacing between the two. So we still want this exact same gap. And so what we want to do is to place this item here on the right side. So basically, we want to align a grid item inside of a grid cell. And the way we do that is by using the justify items property, right? So I know that is way back. We learned that many, many hours ago, but now it is important again. So let's try that right here. So with align, or actually justify, because align is vertically and justify is horizontally, right? And so here this is clearly an issue of horizontal alignment. And so if we set justify items and set it to end, then both of them would move to the right side, right? And so this is what we want for the first one, but not for the second one. And so instead of using justify items on the grid container, we can simply do it for one grid element itself. So for one grid item, we can add justify self and then set that to end. Okay, so again, we learned all that a little bit back, but if you don't remember that, that is not a big problem. Okay, so let's add another class here. So just to select this one, and also one to then select the other one, which we will also need later. So I'm using dash dash for a variation again. So this one is the starter. So let's copy that here. And so as I just demonstrated in the DevTools, here we want justify self, right? And then push it all the way to the end. And so in the end, we end up with this. And so this looks a lot better than what we had before. The columns are now at a nice width, so they look quite natural this way. And yeah, they're still centered. And you see that this one here is aligned to the right side, and the first one is by default aligned to the left side. Right? So very nice, very beautiful. Now we just have this problem that here, this content broke into 2 lines, but we can fix that by making this text, I think, a little bit shorter. Right? So that's one of the problems. Let's fix that one first. So order times are between 11 and 9. So this we can abbreviate to order from 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. So that's the same but shorter, and so that looks a lot nicer. But now another problem is that here, this and this one, they're not really aligned, right? So that looks quite off. And so one solution would be to somehow push this one here to the end. But another solution that I also like is to basically add another bullet point here and then add nothing. So saying that this one here is missing one of the features that this one has. So if you see, this one is quite similar to this one to this one, and these two are actually the same. But then this one gets access to the latest recipes, while this one does not. And so let's add another bullet point here, and actually using another icon. So instead of a check mark, we can use a cross or something. Well, not that. Yeah, this one here. So let's copy that. And then going back here, yeah, it's this one. So let's duplicate this and change the icon. And then we don't need any text at all. So you will see that it now looks quite nice, simply showing basically that this one does not exist. Of course, we need to format it also the same way. So giving it the same class. And so now this is the effect that I was looking for. And so now it makes it that both of these pricing tables have exactly the same size. Nice. And now let's start a little bit about visual hierarchy here. So these 2 pricing tables, they now look exactly the same. But what we want our user to do is to basically select this one here on the right? Because, well, this one here makes the company more money. And so we can say that this one here is the best value, because it actually is. And we can also highlight this one here. And the way I'm going to do that is by de-emphasizing this one here on the left. So remember that that is one of the techniques that we can use for creating a visual hierarchy between these bigger components. And so that's what I'm going to do now. So only this one will have this background color, and here I will remove it. So let's add a similar class name to the second one. So pricing plan complete. And then I will add that background color only to this one. Okay. So this actually already creates a nice effect, right? We can immediately see that somehow this is more important. So this draws a lot more attention. However, like this, I think that this one here feels kind of lost, right? So to fix that, we can just give it a small border just so that it doesn't look completely detached from this one, because it's kind of lacking a structure right now. So if we give it back some border, then that should fix it. So let's add a border of 2 pixels, solid, and with the exact same color. So just ever so subtle, just so we can see that it is a bit distinguished from the rest of the background. Okay. So that looks way better. There is just one very small problem of alignment that we created by adding these 2 pixels here as a border. So let me show you by scrolling down here, and then as these 2 buttons here approach the end of the screen, watch how this one here is a little bit higher up than this one. And so the reason for that is these 2 pixels that we added basically on top of the already existing padding. All right. So remember from the box model how these basically add up together. And so we need to remove these 2 pixels. So for this one. So actually this padding will only apply to the complete pricing. And then this one here, to compensate, will have a little bit less. So 4.6 rem. So this is just a minor issue, but now it is fixed. And so it's perfect now. Let's also emphasize a little bit here some of these numbers. So just again to make this one here a bit more prominent. So in the second one, yeah, let's use our strong element. So 2 meals per day. Let's actually include the meals here. And then here order 24/7. All right. And so with this, we are almost finished here. And we could leave it like this, but I want to add something more, which is basically like a ribbon here saying that this one is the best value. And so this is going to be similar to something that we already did before a couple of times. So again, basically we will add like an element here, which will go like this, and then it should say best value. So how do you think we could do that? Well, one great way would be to use a before or an after pseudo element. All right. So on this one. So let's copy that. And well, I didn't want this one. All right. And then here the content should be best value. And so that should then immediately place it somewhere here. Yeah, so here it is. So nice, but let's now format it and place it in this corner. So for that, we're going to use absolute positioning. Absolute. And so for that, of course, the parent element inside of which it should be placed, we need to make it a relative positioned element. So this one here, let's make the text uppercase. So text transform uppercase. Let's increase the font size here, 1.4 rem maybe. And let's make it bold as well. And like really bold this time. Oh, and of course we still need to position it here. And let's just start with top 0 and right 0. All right. And let's give it some background color as well. And we could, of course, use the orange color that we have been using, but let's actually go for this yellow here. So this is one that we used for the tags previously. So let's reuse that same color here. All right, and there it is already. So already nicely positioned. Let's maybe give it some padding, and then we can position it exactly where we want it. So padding, maybe 8 pixels at the top to make it not too big. And then on the sides, it doesn't really matter for now. Let's just use 3.2 rem right here. And the text, I think, could be also a bit darker. So the contrast didn't look so nice there on the yellow. Yeah, that's better. All right. So remember I said that I want it kind of to be like this. So we want to rotate it a little bit. And so for that, we can use, again, transform. And now, indeed, we will use the rotate that I had shown you before. So 45 degrees. And so that is already looking like something. But now to position it exactly where we want it to be, we need to play around like with the top and right values until we find the right position. So let's open up this one here and find the pseudo element here in the HTML. And then let's play around, as I said, a little bit with these numbers. So let's say maybe we start at 5%. So we want to make these here actually also basically flexible so that when something changes here, then the position here stays also at the same place. And I'm using percentages here because that's just usually the best choice when we're building a flexible layout. So on the right, let's also like say 5%, or actually that must be minus. And that's not really enough. So let's go a bit down. Okay. Let's maybe give it some more space here, actually, like this, or maybe like this, yeah. And then we need to just position it nicely. And yeah, I think like this, it looks okay, right? Now, what we need to do next is, of course, basically cut off these corners here. So these we do not want, right? So, do you remember how we can do that? Well, we can simply use overflow hidden. Well, actually not on this one. So the overflow hidden needs to be always on the parent element. So basically the one on which this one here is overflowing. So this parent element here, this one will want to hide the content that is overflowing it. Okay, so let's add that there, and let's also memorize these values here. So 6 and minus 7. So 6 here and minus 7%, of course. Okay, and now, as I was saying, it is this parent element here which needs the overflow hidden. Okay, and nice. But still not perfect, because here, of course, we want this to go all the way out. So we don't want to see any corners there. So we need to increase the padding here a bit, let's say 4. And so that makes it then bigger, but it also makes it so that, that it changed kind of here the position again. So let's just add something big here, like 8 rem, just to make sure that that doesn't happen. So let's play around with this a little bit here. And that is starting to look good. But to see it better, we need to turn off this one, right? So this is basically a lot of just playing around until we find the right value here. And yeah, this might be it actually. I think this looks now as if it was centered. And so let's leave it like this. So you see that here we cannot use like a nice flexbox or something like this to make it really centered. So this is just playing around until we find the right spot. So minus 18 here. And then down here the padding is 8. So minus 18 and 8 rem here. So now that should be fixed, and that does look very beautiful. So this definitely gives it another really nice visual effect right here. Okay, so this part here, I now consider it finished. And so let's actually very quickly just get started on the next part, which is the features part, just so I can show you something else. So right here after this first grid right here, so we have this grid here, so container grid with 2 columns, but now we want another grid right after it, right? And that's no problem at all. we can simply create another similar thing to this. So right here, so div container, and it's a grid. And here, let's see how many features we have, but it should be 4. So yeah, so 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so let's just add 4 div elements here really fast, called feature, and then just duplicating them. And so here we want the one with 4 columns. And this one I think we already have. Yeah, here it is. So 4 equally sized columns. Okay, but now here's what I actually want to show you, which is the fact that there is now, of course, no spacing between these grids here. So this is the first time this is happening where we have multiple grids inside of the same section. But that is, of course, perfectly acceptable. So absolutely nothing wrong with that, and it should actually be really common. And so we need a way of working with that situation automatically. So we do not want to manually have to add now some margin bottom to this first grid. So instead, we basically want that to happen automatically. So what we can do here is to basically add a margin bottom to this grid right here. So let's use once again our 9.6 rem here, which is kind of a standard that we have been using for vertical spacing. So let's check that out. And indeed, now here we have that space that we need. However, if we move up here, you will see that space being added everywhere. Well, here that's actually not the case, but here we set it manually, I remember. And so that's why it's not here. But in this one, it should now be there. So this grid now has, of course, that margin and then plus all this additional padding. So here we have way too much space because this one, we actually do not want this margin bottom, right? Because indeed, there is only one grid here. And so it doesn't make sense that this one has a margin bottom as well. So that is actually quite simple to fix, because we can simply say that when a grid is the last child, then the margin bottom should be 0. And so, well, let's fire up our inspector here again. And so indeed, now the margin here is gone, right? It has a margin bottom of 0, while this one here at the bottom, it still maintains the one that we want. So in the pricing section, now this grid does have the 9.6 rem, and this one does not. Okay, so this is a new and important addition to our grid, because this will allow us to basically have multiple grids inside of the same section. Okay, now we can just make this even a little bit nicer and using a trick that I haven't shown you before. So let me show it to you now. So there is another pseudo class that we can use, which is the not. So here, what we're going to say is a grid that is not the last child will have this margin, and that's it. So we can remove it from here, and we can remove all this and have it all in just this one line of code. So this probably looks a bit confusing, so let's analyze what we just did here. So before, basically by default, we were always adding this margin here on all the grid elements. And then after that, we selected the ones that were the last and removed it. So first we put it everywhere, and then we removed it on some of them, right? But now we are doing it the other way around. Now we will only add it if it is not the last child. Okay, so that is different, right? We will not simply add it always by default. Instead, we will only add this margin to the bottom if, again, the grid element is not the last child inside of its parent container. Okay, so I think this makes sense, and this code is a little bit nicer than this one. All right, and if you want to practice using this kind of code here, then you can go back to many examples where we did this, so without using the not. And so all there, you can replace what we did here using the not pseudo class with last child. Okay, so that would be good for you to practice, I think. And so with that, we can now build this feature section or this feature part here right in the next video.